Welcome to Conversations with the Smith Family. I'm Doug Taylor, the CEO of the Smith Family, and through these conversations we look at work right around Australia that's focused on building great futures for young people through the power of education. Today we'll be talking about how we resource and mobilise people to support that work, and I'm joined by Mark Pearce, the CEO of Volunteering Australia. Mark's had a background in investment banking and public policy and now brings those skills to his role with Volunteering Australia. Welcome, Mark.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Looking forward to our conversation today, and I've enjoyed working with you on the national strategy for volunteering and the council that supports that as the chair, and seeing that work continue to grow and thrive, and we'll talk a bit about that today and its future. But thanks for joining us. Mark, in these conversations, we like to start with a personal question for you, given that we're an education-focused charity, around what's your most memorable education moment?
I was, at best, a middling student through school, but I had a teacher, a math teacher, as a matter of fact, who said to me in year 12, and I would suggest perhaps a little late, I probably could have done with that in primary school, but he said, you need to consider that education is not necessarily about the subject. Education is about providing pathways, and they might be personal and they might be professional. They may well be the opportunity to engage in conversations that you haven't had before. But because you've looked towards education and you've engaged with interesting thinkers, with thoughts that you perhaps may not have got to, and perhaps if you did, they might have been a little bit down the track. Education provides you with the opportunity to engage with networks of people on a like-for-like basis. And it's fundamentally important, especially for me at school. What am I going to do? I thought, well, maybe journalism is my thing. Ultimately, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but that wasn't going to happen. And, you know, at that age, it was very difficult to say, this is the thing. But the criticality of changing the frame around education to engaging with great thoughts, which expand your mind, build networks, take you on a path, perhaps a conversation, or maybe create opportunities was really important to me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You know, it's Paul Keating used to talk about education as the key to the door. It opens up new possibilities, yes, new things to learn, new parts of the world to explore. So it all comes from a conversation with a maths teacher, which is just fantastic. Mark, as the CEO of Volunteering Australia, you have a kind of a unique perspective on the place of volunteering in our nation. Can you just reflect on how you see volunteering playing a role in supporting our nation and our country and our community?
Of course. I think for Volunteering Australia, and certainly for me as the CEO of this organisation, volunteering sits at the heart of community. Volunteering is unique in many ways. One of those ways is that it provides an opportunity to engage with your aspiration for the future. We can at all times, and certainly have in the past, I'm sure, felt somewhat powerless around things that are taking place, the pace of change, the way that the world is shaped today, positively, negatively, or perhaps neutrally. Volunteering gives you the opportunity to say, hey, this thing is important to me. I'm passionate about this thing, and I'm going to put my hand up and I'm going to do something about it. And you have agency, and you have flexibility, and you have choice around what your future looks like by engaging in volunteering. And that's a contemporary position, I suppose. When I think about volunteering, and I'll oftentimes say in public fora and other, that this thing that we call volunteering, with all of its institutional frameworks and its resourcing and its representation, and organisations like Volunteering Australia, for example, the act of volunteering has been taking place on this continent for over 60,000 years. And it's as simple as seeing an issue, seeing a need within community, or just one-to-one, coming up with a solution and engaging in problem solving, finding a solution. For me, volunteering is a remarkably profound way of building a tomorrow that makes sense to us individually and collectively.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love the way you've thought about that. It's a way for us to live out our values that we individually hold. That's kind of, as you were talking about, a way to create change. It's that sort of Gandhi quote, be the change you want to see.
Yes.
In many ways, isn't it? And volunteering is a way to do that.
It is.
And it has been forever.
Yes.
Think about our history and our long history on this land as a community. More personally for you, Mark, I'm interested in why you took on this role and maybe your own experience in volunteering prior to that. Was there an early experience that shaped you and is a connection to why you've taken on the great challenge and opportunity of leading Volunteering Australia?
I used to play a lot of sport when I was younger, a lot of team sport, and inevitably you played the sport, but in order to play the sport, you also engaged with the club. You did things around the club. And I don't know whether I ever thought about it as volunteering. It was just what you did. And that was my entree to volunteering, I suppose. And it's been a long connection. We oftentimes, in speaking with people who are volunteers and in the work that we do, we hear about this lifetime dedication to volunteering. It comes at an early age. And oftentimes it's through sport, but it's oftentimes through other things as well. My earliest connection with volunteering was through sport. The thing that I suppose made sense to me professionally, I spent the majority of my professional life in investment banking, institutional funds management, and those sorts of things. But there was an opportunity, there was a point in time where I said, there's a need for people like me with a skill set, whatever that might be, to engage within community and to make a difference. And as I thought about that, especially through some of the work that I'd done with National Congress of Australia's First Peoples, which was the national peak body for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, I became aware of and worked with Volunteering Australia with that organisation. And I was remarkably impressed with what the organisation stood for, what volunteering means in community of all types. I was lucky enough to be elected to the board when the organisation changed from a member-based board to a skills-based board, and being on the board of Volunteering Australia gave me a sense of what more could be done. And that led inevitably to wanting to be more engaged. And when an opportunity came up, I put my hand up. There was a rigorous process, and very thankfully, I popped out the other side as CEO of this organisation. Fantastic.
That's great to hear that journey. That's one of the things we do a lot at the Smith family, is talk about people's careers.
Yes.
And it's never a straight line in those careers, and that's okay, and it's helpful for young people because they often think they have to have everything planned out.
Yes.
It's never like that. You start somewhere and you just see where it takes you, ultimately, as it has for you.
It's really true. And I suppose the other piece, inevitably, I'm always going to plug the virtues of volunteering.
Yeah.
But it was volunteering that led me into this role.
Right.
So we oftentimes talk about the profound benefits that flow to community as a consequence of volunteering. But those profound benefits also exist for individuals, and they are a pathway to employment. They are a pathway to developing networks, having conversations, all of those sorts of things. So it was by volunteering that I changed my career direction. And I'm sitting here and having this conversation with you today.
That's fascinating. Well, I might come to that in talking about the volunteer experience, because I think that's one of the important things for us to focus on. But just a bit more context on the strategy for volunteering and all the good work that's gone to support that. So today, the way that Australians live their lives is very different to 50, 60 years ago. And, I think the strategy is really trying to speak into that and think about how we contemporise volunteering so more people can be engaged in that. What are the three key challenges, if you like, that you think the strategy is trying to address through what's been articulated as to the future?
I think that in the first instance, it's one around having very sincere recognition, acknowledgement and support from government. Volunteering is a big part of the national workforce. We have lots of fora and we have lots of support for paid employment. 13.7 million Australians are paid in employment. But equally, there are about 5 to 6 million volunteers who volunteer through organisations. There are about 5 million people who volunteer outside of organisations, big part of the national workforce. So having government sincerely engage with volunteering as a fundamental part of community is one of those things. Secondly, would be that we need to think about volunteering in a different way. We need to think about it in a more holistic way, to say that all of those benefits that I spoke about, both to community and to individuals, are profoundly important to the fabric of community, to the lives that we lead and how those lives are led. The third piece, I suppose, is to focus on the volunteer experience. The volunteer experience is such an important piece of it. And the National Strategy for Volunteering, which Volunteering Australia led, but it was developed by the entire volunteering ecosystem. When you read through it, you'll see that they're the voices of volunteers, volunteer managers, organisations and communities. And the thing that kept on coming up, the pathway to not just sustaining volunteering, but ensuring that it thrives into the future, was focusing on the volunteer experience.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I really picked that up in the strategy. I think, for too long, organisations, not-for-profits and the like, have seen the contribution volunteers make to their work and sometimes miss the individuals and their own aspirations, and them trying to realise their personal aspirations and benefits through the volunteering experience, as you've talked about in your own story. So
Yes.
It's great that experience is front and centre in that strategy, and hopefully will lead to better retention of volunteers. Also attraction of volunteers, which is
Yes.
the one I want to talk about now. So, if I think about the Smith family, 102 years old, started by volunteers. Volunteers has been a thread throughout our whole, history. In fact, for the first 50 years of our organisation's history, we were run by volunteers. So really, professional people are only a recent phenomena at the Smith family. And, we look at across the sector, not-for-profit sector, 83% of not-for-profit organisations say they need more volunteers. We know that the participation rate of volunteering has been declining over time. What do you think is one of the key ways to address that in terms of attracting more people back into volunteering? You've mentioned a few things in the strategy, but are there other particular things that you think we need to be thinking about? And I'm thinking about volunteer involving organisations in particular.
Yeah, and this is a fundamentally important question. And I think that when we look at the shape of the volunteering ecosystem, when we look at communities in general, we're seeing that people are looking for more choice and they're looking for more flexibility. They're looking to express their agency around how they spend their time and what they allocate that time towards in different ways. And sometimes that is through organisations. We know that people are far more cause-driven than they have been in recent history. They're looking to attach their time and their passions to causes, not necessarily banners and organisational names. I think that there is an opportunity for organisations to very clearly link their names with the mission, with the cause, not just at a headline level, but in terms of the engagement with volunteers. One of the other things that we learned through the very considerable consultation process that took place, which inevitably led to the development of the national strategy, was that people want to know that the time they spend, that the enthusiasm and the passion that they allocate translates into something. And organisations who do it well keep their volunteers aware of what does that mean? The work that you did this past week with us led to whatever. Over the past 6 months, this is what we have collectively achieved. The community that we focus our mission on is better off because in the past 12 months, these are the things you've done and they've directly translated into. We know that that's one of the key points of both attraction but also retention for volunteers, seeing that their time is connected to meaningful causes rather than just, we need you to be here Monday through Friday or Saturdays at this time, and not really knowing why. What does it mean in the translation? The other piece, which is critical, is to be aware of that change which is taking place within community of, I want to have more choice. And this is why I think we see more and more volunteering that takes place outside of organisations, where people, Doug, you and I might say, hey, that creek down the road from where we live needs a bit of attention. Let's go and do it. We're not going to build an organisation, nor are we going to wait for someone else to do it. We'll just go and do it. This is particularly important in a time where people feel somewhat powerless. They're able to just get up, go and do something and make a difference. So understanding that desire, understanding that need, and then considering the mission within the context of individual desires, motivations, and perhaps even reshaping volunteer position descriptions to provide for that.
Great insights, really helpful, Mark. And, I think particularly about the potential of technology too,
Yes.
to create those sorts of opportunities that
Indeed.
you're really talking about. I mean, it's quite remarkable. And, at the Smith family, we've been doing a lot more in terms of remote volunteering, people volunteering from home, people volunteering online, chat-based mentoring, all sorts of new ways, because we're living our lives differently.
Yes.
And we want to volunteer in the way that we live our lives. So it makes a lot of sense. And Mark, just in closing, and given the kind of bird's eye view you have across the volunteering involving sector, can you give us an anecdote or an example of where you see real hope for the future in terms of something that you think gives us an insight into what we need to be doing more of? Is there something you can conclude with on that front?
I think we oftentimes speak about the power of volunteering when we talk about times of crisis. We know that when people are feeling most vulnerable, there are also the times that people put up their hands. And it's oftentimes those vulnerable people who put up their hands and say, I can make a difference here. I can help someone out here. I can alleviate some suffering. That particular reflection, experience of what volunteering is when times are toughest and when you would necessarily and naturally expect people will start to look inwardly, to retreat into their shells, are the times that people come out. And it's incumbent upon organisations like Volunteering Australia and Smith Family and others who do wonderful work within community to understand the fact that there is an intrinsic desire within people to be part of community, to build community. Our responsibility, and certainly when I think about the work I do and the organisation I lead, that responsibility sits with enabling, removing as many barriers as we possibly can to let people get on and do the things that they want to do aspirationally, with compassion, with an eye to a better tomorrow, to remove barriers, create pathways, and make the volunteering experience all that it should be and all that it can be.
So thank you, Mark, for this conversation today. And thanks also for your leadership in volunteering right across Australia. And thanks also for joining in on this conversation. I hope you found it useful. If you'd like to listen to more conversations with the Smith family, jump on to thesmithfamily.com.au.